The dream of building a transcontinental railroad became an all-consuming obsession for two young men, two ambitious civil engineers. One lived in California, the other on the East Coast. Although they never met, they shared the same passionate belief. Before he was 28, Ted Judah had already engineered the spectacular Niagara Gorge Railroad in New York. But his vivid imagination and optimism drove him to conjure up the grandest railroad of all. The biggest obstacle was finding a route through the difficult, seemingly impassable Sierra Nevada mountain range.
He knew it could be done, and he devoted every waking hour and every increment of his energy to convincing others that it was possible. And it got to the point where people would literally cross the street to avoid confronting him on a sidewalk. He was known as Crazy Judah and called that to his face.
Crazy Judah set out to the Sierra on horseback. With him, he took his notebooks to record a path across the mountains. But after months of fruitless searching, he ran into a dead end. Frustrated to the point of despair, he received a letter that would dramatically change everything.
Dr. Daniel Strong, a druggist and physician from Dutch Flat, had done surveying work himself for a wagon road in the area, and he pointed out to Judah in a letter that there was a natural inclined plane, a ramp, which would allow Judah to connect his surveyed route with a line that would carry him over the mountains at Donner Lake. This was an exciting discovery, and it really transformed Judah's harebrained scheme into an idea that would really be something that could be achieved.
The following summer, Judah returned to the Sierra and completed a brilliant survey. He located an extraordinary series of ridges that could carry a rail line through the Sierra and then down to Nevada. While Judah continued his surveying, another visionary in the East dreamed of a transcontinental railroad. As a high-strung, driven young man, Grenville Dodge rebelled against the confines of New England society types, declaring, "They are a stench to my nostrils." Dodge confided his dream to his sister. "Soon you'll be whirled along by steam, never dreaming that 4 years before it was a wild open country inhabited only by wild beasts and the red man." Dodge risked his life to prove it could be done. Secretly, he ventured into Indian Territory to survey a rail line. But back on the East Coast, no one bought his dream. When the Civil War broke out, Dodge wrangled a colonel's commission in the Union Army. But the railroad would remain his obsession. Back in Sacramento, Ted Judah had more luck persuading 4 merchants to finance his dream. They would be known to history as the Big Four of California. Charles Crocker was a crude, loud, hard-drinking giant with fiery red hair who owned a dry goods store. Charles P. Huntington and Mark Hopkins operated the largest hardware enterprise on the Pacific Coast. Huntington had come to California to mine for gold, but gave it up after only one morning of digging. Hopkins was a soft-spoken vegetarian who knew how to drive a shrewd bargain. The fourth member, Leland Stanford, longed to become governor and would get his wish sooner than even he imagined.
They were all involved with Republican politics. They were abolitionists. They were interested in making sure California stayed connected with the Union. They were also shrewd Yankee businessmen who knew a business opportunity when they saw it.
The Big Four and Judah began the Central Pacific Railroad on the second floor of Huntington and Hopkins' hardware store. Judah was sent to Washington as an accredited agent of the Central Pacific. Ted Judah helped Congress draft the Pacific Railroad Act that established 2 companies, Central Pacific to build west from Sacramento, and the Union Pacific to build east from Omaha. The timing was perfect. The year was 1862, and with the outbreak of the Civil War, congressmen were anxious to see the railroad built quickly.
For Abraham Lincoln, the creation of the Pacific Railroad was not so much a commercial act or an act of technology as it was a political act. We had to connect the East with the West in the same way as Lincoln was trying to preserve the North and the South as one country.
of 1869. As the armies raced to reach the prospering Mormon communities in Utah's Salt Lake Valley, an incredibly bizarre development took place. With no predetermined connecting point, the two competing grading crews literally graded roadbeds past each other for over 250 miles, each laying claim to the right-of-way. The government ordered the railroads to fix a meeting point, or we'll do it for you. Grenville Dodge and Collis Huntington met in Washington and hammered out a compromise. Both companies would profit from the Salt Lake City traffic. The tracks would join the following month at Promontory Summit, Utah. With no more subsidies being issued, the race was officially over. But the track layers didn't slow down.
As the tracks drew closer together and it became apparent that the Pacific Railroad was going to be a reality and not just a dream, they began feeling that they were truly part of a great national work. They began to know that they were doing something that would outlive them, outlast them, that even down to the most anonymous man with a shovel in his hands, this was going to be a work for the ages, and they had a part in it.
As the two lines moved towards Promontory, one of the world's most amazing bets was wagered. The Central Pacific's Charlie Crocker had once boasted to Thomas Durant, the head of the Union Pacific, that his men could lay 10 miles of track in a single day. Durant staked $10,000 that it was impossible. Crocker chose April 28th to be 10-Mile Day. For the hand-picked team of Crocker's workers, this event was the ultimate test of endurance. The day began with Chinese workers shuttling iron on horse-drawn hand cars to a crew of 8 Irish rail carriers and the track-laying team. They worked without a break and refused to eat a lunch. The track moved forward at a rate of almost a mile an hour. In 12 hours, the Central Pacific workers spiked 10 miles and 56 feet of track and lifted over 2 million pounds of iron rail, a record that still stands today. For their feat, they were given 4 days' pay. As the crews neared Promontory, plans were underway for a ceremony celebrating the joining of the lines, the moment that the nation had been waiting for. 2 brand new trains with railroad officials set out from Omaha and Sacramento to meet at the finish line.
The scene at Promontory that May 10th was one of contrast. The grizzled veterans of this incredible campaign, in their dusty clothes, with their calloused hands, with the leadership of the railroads in their fancy private cars, with their champagne and their fresh fruits. The contrast was striking.
Western Union stood by to signal the moment the last spike was driven. Like the Apollo landing on the moon, virtually all of America waited for the news. At 11:15 a.m., the Central Pacific's Jupiter pulled forward to the Union Pacific's number 119, each crowded with exuberant, exhausted workers. The ceremony called for Thomas Durant, the head of the Union Pacific, and Leland Stanford, president of the Central Pacific, to drive not 1 golden spike, as legend has it, but 4 spikes. 2 gold, 1 silver, and the 4th a mixture of gold, silver, and iron.
Governor Stanford stepped up, made one huge swing and missed the spike and hit the tie. A huge roar of laughter went up from the workers who had probably driven several 100,000 spikes in their career. So then they offered the spike maul to Dr. Durant, who had apparently a slight hangover, and he couldn't even hit the spike at all, and he hit the dirt. And they finally had to hand the spike maul to a worker of the railroad who drove it home.
The telegraph operator tapped out the message, "Done." That was transmitted within seconds around the country. The nation was ecstatic. Cannons were fired, whistles blew, and parades marched down Main Street. The dream of a united nation, coast to coast, was finally realized. The first Transcontinental Railroad ended up taking 6 years to complete, coming in ahead of schedule. Even to this day, no one knows exactly how many men sacrificed their lives. The two railroad companies were awarded a total of almost 21 million acres, more land than Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Vermont combined. Theodore Judah's wildest dream had been realized. 6 years later, a painting of the ceremony at Promontory included him in tribute. Grenville Dodge would have more railroad challenges in the years ahead, but nothing would compare to this glory.
Closing the tracks at Promontory was in many ways the last act in creating the United States. And it was just the beginning of a new period, a new set of actors, a new set of tools, a new set of values that would radically remake, would completely transform the world they lived in and give us the world we exist in today.